the janitor who turned a ruthless Mafia king into a protective softie. Vincent Castellano lay broken on the marble floor of the 65th level of Moretti Tower, his breath shallow, blood spreading beneath him. Dante Moretti stood above him, fists torn open, his white dress shirt marked with red. His chest rose and fell in sharp, controlled breaths, his eyes darkened by a rage that filled the entire room. The man who ruled Chicago's criminal world looked one step away from finishing what he'd started. Behind him, Iris Bennett pressed herself against the wall. Small frame, honey blonde hair slipping out of her bun, oversized janitor uniform hanging loosely on her. Her wrist was swollen where Vincent had grabbed her. Fear shook through her, but she couldn't look away from the man who had just destroyed someone to pull her out of danger. Dante turned toward her, and the fury that had fueled him seconds earlier disappeared. His shoulders lowered. His voice softened into something no one had ever heard from him. "Let me see your wrist." In that quiet moment, the most feared man in Chicago revealed a side of himself no one believed existed. What could push a man with no mercy to shatter another human being just to protect a janitor he barely knew? Before we go back to where this began, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Let's begin. Dante Moretti ruled Chicago's Gold Coast with a presence that needed no introduction. His name alone carried enough weight to shift conversations, freeze rooms, and send entire crews into silence. Moretti Tower, rising 70 stories above Wacker Drive, was the center of everything he controlled. Anyone who stepped inside could sense the difference between the lower floors, polished, legitimate, filled with lawyers, accountants, and executives, and the upper levels where his real power lived. Those top 30 floors were the heart of an empire built on violence, discipline, and absolute control. Dante had built his position through actions that people still whispered about. The Indiana Dunes incident remained one of the most retold events in Chicago's criminal circles. A rival crew tried to challenge him, believing he was too young to hold territory. Their bodies were found scattered across the dunes, buried deep enough that only the shifting sand revealed them weeks later. Another story told of 3 rival families who tried to unite against him. All 3 leaders vanished within 48 hours, leaving their crews leaderless and scrambling. Even federal agents weren't safe. Rumors spread about agents who pushed too far, investigated too boldly, and never made it home. None of these tales were officially linked to him, but everyone knew who was responsible. His reputation wasn't shaped by loud threats or public displays. It came from his precision. Every move he made served a purpose. Every decision protected the empire he'd carved out of the city's darkest corners. People feared him not just because of what he'd done, but because he never acted without intention. When he set his mind on something, the result was absolute. Dante's days followed a strict pattern. Mornings were spent at Gibson's atelier, always the same private table overlooking the river. His meetings covered everything from distribution routes to political leverage. He rarely spoke more than necessary, and he never repeated himself. Those who worked with him understood that listening was mandatory and questioning him was dangerous. His afternoons were spent moving between properties, ensuring every part of his operation ran smoothly. Nights often placed him on Rush Street, where bartenders and club owners adjusted their tone, posture, and volume the moment he stepped inside. His life functioned like a well-oiled machine, but it was hollow. Women who approached him did so for status or survival. He treated those interactions with the same detachment he used when signing paperwork. They were transactions, never connections. He didn't touch anyone without intent, and he didn't let anyone touch the parts of him he kept buried. Trust was a luxury he refused to grant. Love was a concept he viewed as a weakness, a story told to people who needed comfort. He believed himself incapable of it, and for years he was correct. Moretti Tower reflected him. The lower floors buzzed with activity. Bright offices, polished conference rooms, and steady foot traffic created the image of a respectable business empire. No one on those floors needed to know how Dante secured his influence. They only needed to observe the rules, be productive, be loyal, and never ask questions about anything above the 40th floor. Those upper levels operated under a different set of expectations. Thick security doors, biometric scanners, and a staff trained to keep their heads down filled those spaces. The atmosphere changed the higher one climbed. Conversations were shorter. Movements were sharper. People walked with the awareness that any misstep could be their last. Dante's office sat on the topmost floor, surrounded by glass walls that overlooked the Chicago skyline. It wasn't designed for comfort, it was designed for control. The room held only what he needed: a desk, a leather chair, a bar cart, and a single framed photograph of his mother. The fear people held for him came from more than his actions. It came from the unknown. No one understood what he cared about. No one knew which lines couldn't be crossed until it was too late. He showed no weaknesses, no emotional openings, no moments of softness. He didn't drink enough to slip up. He didn't talk enough to reveal anything. He didn't form friendships, alliances, or attachments that could be used against him. Every part of his life was intentionally guarded, each detail sharpened to serve his position. People who entered his orbit learned quickly that Dante Moretti was not a man who forgave mistakes. His silence could crush a person faster than physical force. His judgment came without warning and without mercy. Employees followed his rules not because they were posted anywhere, but because his presence communicated them. He didn't tolerate laziness. He didn't tolerate disrespect. He didn't tolerate anyone who believed they could read him or get close to him. For years, nothing shook him. Challenges came and went, crews rose and fell, agents pressed and retreated, but Dante remained untouched. His world stayed controlled, impenetrable, predictable in a way that kept him safe. He knew who he was. He knew what he needed to remain at the top. He never questioned it. Until the first night he saw Iris Bennett on the security cameras. She wasn't hired by him. She wasn't part of his world. She wasn't looking for power or protection. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was simply doing her job, quietly, diligently, and without expectation. But without realizing it, she stepped into the one place he never expected anyone to reach, the part of him he had buried so deeply he believed it no longer existed. And that single disruption, the smallest shift, was enough to crack the foundation of everything he built. Iris Bennett grew up in Englewood, in a two-bedroom apartment with thin walls, a leaky bathroom ceiling, and a mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep them afloat. Her mother's kindness was the center of her childhood, but cancer took her long before Iris was ready. The treatments emptied their savings, swallowed their credit, and left Iris with medical debt that erased every plan she once had for college. She wanted to become a teacher, someone who could give children the stability she never had. Instead, she entered adulthood already buried under bills she had no way to escape. At 24, she worked nights for prestige commercial cleaning. The pay wasn't good, the hours were unforgiving, but it covered part of the debt and kept a roof over her head. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., she cleaned offices downtown while the rest of the city slept. She was used to people overlooking her. Cleaners weren't acknowledged, and Iris learned early that invisibility could be a shield. She wore oversized uniforms to avoid attention. She kept her head down, moved quickly, and never lingered where she wasn't needed. Eye contact was something she rationed. Being overlooked meant being safe. Her supervisors assigned her to Moretti Tower 3 months ago. The building was considered a premium contract, more demanding but steady. As soon as she stepped into the break room, the other janitors pulled her aside. They warned her in hushed voices that the top floors were different. That the man who owned the tower wasn't someone she ever wanted to see up close. They told her to stick to her schedule, follow protocol exactly, and never linger on the executive levels. Iris listened. She didn't want trouble. She only wanted to finish her shift and get home. Despite the building's intimidating reputation, she took pride in her work. She moved quietly through the offices each night, wiping down surfaces, emptying bins, and arranging things neatly. She watered plants that everyone else ignored. She straightened picture frames without thinking. She believed small things mattered, even when no one noticed. Those moments gave her a sense of control in a life where most things felt unpredictable. Her routine rarely changed. She started on the lower floors, working her way up. The executive levels were always silent when she reached them around 2:30 or 3 a.m. She'd push her cart down the empty corridor and let herself into Dante Moretti's office using her access card. She never saw him. His presence lived in the room through the cool orderliness of his desk, the untouched bar cart, and the single-framed photograph of a woman she assumed was his mother. Iris always paused at that picture, wiping the glass with slow, careful movements, as if cleaning it mattered more than anything else she touched. She moved through his office with the same quiet consistency every night. She never opened drawers, never touched anything that wasn't part of her job. She emptied his bin, polished the glass walls, and vacuumed the rug in straight, even lines. She treated the space with respect because it was part of her work, not because she knew who it belonged to. To her, it was just another room she was responsible for. She had no idea the owner of the tower had already noticed her existence through security cameras she didn't know were there. Outside of work, her life was simple but exhausting. She lived in a small studio apartment in Pilsen, with beige walls, second-hand furniture, and a window that let in just enough light to remind her morning was coming. Most days, she arrived home as the sun rose. She'd kick off her shoes, microwave leftovers, and fall asleep with her uniform still on. Her body ran on a mix of caffeine, determination, and the quiet hope that one day things would get easier. Her commute was a nightly ritual. She carried a backpack with her cleaning gloves, a water bottle, and a paperback she rarely had the energy to read. The red line took her from her neighborhood to downtown, and she spent most of the ride leaning against the window, listening to tired workers, night shift nurses, and security guards discuss their lives. She liked hearing snippets of strangers' conversations. It made the city feel less lonely. People rarely noticed her, and that worked in her favor. Security guards barely glanced at her badge. Office workers leaving late stepped around her cart without acknowledging her. To them, she was part of the background, someone essential but forgettable. She had learned to be comfortable in that role. Being overlooked meant fewer risks, fewer confrontations, fewer people asking questions about her life. Invisibility was something she chose. She found safety in it. But she also carried a quiet ache, the kind that comes from wanting to be seen without wanting the danger that attention could bring. Still, she pushed that feeling aside. Wanting more didn't change the reality in front of her. 3 months into her assignment, she believed she had adjusted. She knew the building's layout, the timing of its security rotations, the quirks of each floor. She believed she understood her place in the tower. She had no idea her world was about to collide with the one man she had been. February had arrived with a cruel bite that night. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through the streets, and snow crunched under Iris Bennett's boots as she raced through downtown Chicago. Her train from Pilsen had been delayed, and every second of lost time pressed on her like weight she couldn't shake. She knew the schedule for Moretti Tower like the back of her hand, and being late unsettled her. She had to make up for it. By the time she reached the 68th floor, the building was quiet. She swiped her ID badge, opened the double doors, and stepped into Dante Moretti's office. The lights were off, as they always were when she arrived. She pulled her cart forward, unpacked her supplies, and began her routine, dusting, emptying the trash, vacuuming. Her movements were precise, rehearsed from months of repetition. Then a voice broke the silence. Low, sharp, and unfamiliar in a way that sent her heart racing. "Who the hell are you?" Her hands froze mid-motion. She hadn't seen anyone enter. Turning slowly, she found him emerging from the darkness, a figure larger and more commanding than she had imagined from the single photograph she had glimpsed months before. Dante Moretti filled the room like a force that made air itself bend around him. His white shirt was slightly untucked, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and his dark hair, slightly tousled, framed a face sharper than any she had ever noticed in real life. His slate-gray eyes were nothing she could compare to, assessing her like she was a subject under scrutiny. I'm the janitor. Iris Bennett, she stammered, fumbling for her ID badge. Her hands shook, and her voice caught in her throat. Prestige commercial cleaning. I have clearance. She held up the badge, her movements clumsy under his gaze. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to tighten. You've been cleaning my office for 3 months, he said. Never touched anything you shouldn't. Never looked where you weren't supposed to. You haven't stolen or snooped. Why? I'm just doing my job, she whispered, lowering her eyes. She felt exposed, as if simply being there had drawn her entire life into this one room. I just want to do it right. That's all. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke softly, almost quietly, "You're afraid of me." Yes, she admitted. The word escaped as a tremor, but she didn't retract it. I know I should be, and I am. Smart, he replied. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. His gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat longer, then flicked toward the photograph on his desk. Without thinking, Iris straightened it. The glass tilted slightly from dusting. She adjusted it so it faced perfectly forward. He walked to the photo, and for the first time, a shadow of something human crossed his face. She would have liked you, he said, voice low, uneven. I've been watching you on the cameras. You care about things most people ignore. Plants. Photos. You do these small things, and it matters to you. Iris froze. She hadn't realized she was being watched. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The room, which had seemed impossibly large, now felt intimate and suffocating all at once. She didn't know how to react. I like to do my work well, she managed, voice small. Even when no one notices. You notice things that others wouldn't, he said, tone soft but intense. Most people don't. There was a long pause. A noise broke it, a sound so unfamiliar that her stomach twisted. It was almost a laugh. Not a full laugh, not joyous, not loud, but a brief, dry sound that could have gone unnoticed if she hadn't been listening so closely. A man who didn't laugh, and yet, there it was. The conversation turned quiet. He asked questions about the city, about her life, about why she did the work she did. She answered cautiously, aware of how carefully her words might be weighed. The way he looked at her wasn't just curiosity, it was appraisal, judgment, and something she couldn't name. The clock moved forward, but neither of them noticed. When the moment broke, it was because she realized she had to leave before she drew more attention than she could handle. She started to gather her cart, her heart pounding in a rhythm that made the room seem louder than it was. He watched her. She could feel it, a weight pressing on her back that wasn't physical but impossible to ignore. I'll see you next shift, she said, voice still trembling. She didn't look at him as she stepped through the double doors. She had learned to move quickly, to disappear as efficiently as possible. But for the first time, she felt observed in a way that unsettled her entirely. He didn't follow. He stood by the window, looking out over the city. The first light of dawn had begun to outline the skyline, and he remained there long after she was gone. Something had shifted, though he could not name it. A sliver of awareness that the world might be different, or at least that his response to it could change, had settled into him. For Iris, the night passed as any other. She walked back to the red line, cold fingers gripping her bag strap, mind racing. The encounter replayed in fragments, his voice, the photograph, the watchful gaze. Something had altered her routine without her realizing it. She felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The city seemed unchanged, yet the tower she cleaned each night felt alive with a presence she could not escape. Neither knew it then, but that night would be remembered not for the cold or the snow or the late train. It would be remembered for the quiet collision between two worlds, one forged in fear and power, the other in invisibility and careful observation. One glance, one acknowledgement, had started a change neither could have predicted. After that night, the dynamic between Iris Bennett and Dante Moretti began to shift in ways she could not have anticipated. At first, the changes were subtle. He appeared during her cleaning shifts more often than necessary, leaning against a doorway, observing her movements with a quiet intensity. She couldn't tell if he was judging her or simply taking note, but she felt the weight of his presence even when she tried to ignore it. One night, he asked a question that startled her. "Do you like this city?" It was simple, ordinary, but it carried an unexpected interest. She answered carefully, describing the streets she rode through on the Red Line, the corners of Pilsen she appreciated, the small cafes she sometimes visited. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. There was no punishment, no harsh words, only attention she had not known could exist in someone like him. The questions became more personal over time. "What did you want to be before?" His voice trailed unspoken, yet she understood. She admitted she had wanted to teach, that her mother's medical debts had made the dream impossible. He absorbed her words, the expression on his face unreadable. When she mentioned the Red Line commute from Pilsen, his brow furrowed as though calculating the distance, the cold journey she endured nightly. Small, inexplicable gestures followed. The coffee maker in the break room, now stocked with fresh beans, carried a note, for the night shift. DM. Her contract was revised, a modest increase in pay, bonus clauses included, no explanation given other than that it had been approved. Cameras, subtly positioned along her usual walk home, caught details of anyone who lingered on her street. At first, she thought it coincidental, but patterns emerged. Someone was watching, quietly, attentively. Iris felt both observed and protected, a contradictory sensation that made her uneasy. The recognition of this attention grew gradually. Dante's presence became a fixture. He was no longer simply a man who ruled from above, but a constant near her life in ways she could feel even when she did not see him. Conversations lengthened, and she found herself speaking more freely. She described parts of her childhood, her mother's illness, her lost dreams, and he listened. He never mocked or dismissed her. Over these weeks, his glances changed. Initially, they had been assessing, measuring her reactions. Now, the attention she received carried an edge of possessiveness, a silent declaration that he was taking note of more than her movements or words. The intensity of it made her aware of herself in new ways. She realized she was not invisible, not really, and that someone with the power to reach anyone, to control entire networks, had chosen to focus on her. Her confusion grew alongside a cautious awareness. She wondered if she was imagining it, the watchful protection, the way her words were valued, the little improvements and gestures. Yet the evidence was tangible. She began adjusting her behavior, more careful now, more conscious of the small privileges she had started to enjoy. The streets of Pilsen felt different under the subtle surveillance, the ride home lighter knowing someone looked out for her safety. Dante's presence extended beyond the office. On the rare occasions they spoke in passing, he asked about her day, her plans, the trivialities she normally would have kept private. His voice carried authority, yet it softened when he addressed her concerns. It was a strange balance. He was both the man who ruled with fear over countless others and someone capable of attention so singular, so focused, that it unsettled her. Despite the growing closeness, there was tension in the air. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of anticipation. She had learned to expect his presence, yet she never knew when it would become more. Every look, every gesture, hinted at control, interest, and perhaps desire, but she could not name it fully. She felt the invisible line between curiosity and possession, and it drew her in while keeping her cautious. 3 weeks after their first encounter, the equilibrium broke. The night was ordinary at first. Snow had begun to fall softly outside, and the office floors were silent. Iris moved along her usual path, emptying trash, straightening photos, adjusting the plants. But she could sense the shift, the presence behind her awareness that something was about to change. The quiet questions, the protective gestures, the subtle shifts in their routine had led to this. The air itself seemed to charge with anticipation, as though the city and tower were holding their collective breath. It was the culmination of 3 weeks' worth of small actions, attentive gestures, and quiet observation. The careful questions, the unspoken protection, the changes in routine, all had built toward a moment neither of them could ignore. The foundation laid in silence, in careful observation and attention, was about to collapse into something far more immediate, personal, and unavoidable. The night that began with ordinary work was about to transform everything for both of them. Iris Bennett was methodical in her work, wiping down the marble floors of the 65th floor with deliberate care, straightening a row of leather-bound files, checking that every pen and notepad was aligned. The quiet hum of the HVAC filled the space, interrupted only by the occasional distant rumble of the city far below. She had been on this floor countless times before, but tonight, the routine felt fragile, like a thin veneer over chaos. A sudden shout from the stairwell shattered the calm. Iris froze, listening. Voices, angry, sharp, unfamiliar, echoed through the hall. One was distinctly male, booming over the other, demanding. Another voice, softer and terrified, answered. Her heart surged. She knew instinctively that someone was in danger. Despite the warnings she had always followed about avoiding confrontations, she stepped toward the sound, compelled to act. Rounding the corner, she saw a man cornering a young paralegal near the stairwell exit. The woman's face was pale, her hands raised, pleading. The man's frame was large, shoulders broad, posture menacing. Something about his presence triggered recognition in Iris. She knew the name from whispers in Chicago's underworld, Vincent Castellano. A rival who had clashed with Moretti's organization before. Hey! Iris shouted, the voice trembling but carrying enough to startle him. The paralegal used the distraction to dart past, slipping toward the elevator. Castellano's eyes snapped toward Iris, wide with irritation, and recognition sparked in his gaze. You! He hissed, grabbing her wrist with a force that made her cry out. Pain shot up her arm, her teeth gritting instinctively. You shouldn't be here, he growled, twisting her wrist, his grip a warning. I could break you just as easily as I. His words faltered as the temperature of the room seemed to change. The air stiffened, charged with presence. Dante Moretti appeared behind him, the motion almost unreal. One step, and Castellano was lifted off his feet with such sudden force that his body collided with the wall. Books and folders scattered, the impact echoing through the floor. Dante's eyes, slate gray yet blackened by fury, were fixed on Castellano. His hands were bare, yet the strength they conveyed was enough to immobilize a man who had thought he could intimidate anyone. You touched her, Dante whispered, low, venomous, every word loaded with intent. The warning carried weight beyond comprehension, resonating with unspoken consequences. Castellano's face paled, the bravado of moments ago evaporating. He tried to speak, to argue, but Dante's presence allowed no interruption. What followed was controlled but brutal. Each strike Dante delivered was precise, targeting weaknesses, exploiting balance. There was no chaos, only execution, an unflinching display of skill and fury. Castellano's attempts to retaliate were easily met with counterforce, and within moments, the man who had threatened Iris was reduced to writhing pain, each movement a testament to Dante's dominance. The sound of fists against flesh, of groans, filled the otherwise quiet tower, yet the scene lacked any theatrics. It was pure, lethal focus. Iris watched, heart hammering, unsure whether to step forward or remain frozen. Her eyes met Dante's briefly, and the storm in them softened for just a moment. That fleeting glance reminded her that this was not mindless aggression, it was protection, absolute and unwavering. The confrontation ended almost as suddenly as it began. Dante pulled back, his chest heaving, sweat matting his hair. He reached for his phone, tapping a few numbers with calm authority. Within minutes, men appeared to remove Castellano's broken body. There was no argument, no hesitation. They moved quickly, efficient, acknowledging Dante's order without question. Dante returned to Iris, the transition almost surreal. The man who had been pure fury moments ago now exuded controlled calm. He knelt to assess her wrist, eyes sharp but not cruel, hands steady as he carefully tested the bruises and guided her to sit. "He'll live," Dante said, his voice measured, "but he'll never use that hand again. Everyone will know why." The message was clear. Protection came at a cost, and those who threatened her would pay. Iris could barely form words, shock holding her tongue. The knowledge that a man capable of such violence had intervened solely because of her presence left her disoriented. The line between fear and safety blurred as Dante's attention shifted entirely to her well-being. Through the hallways of Moretti Tower, the echo of that moment lingered. Security cameras would later show the aftermath: Castellano's retreat, the scattered debris, the silent witnesses to a man who did not tolerate threat. The story of what occurred would circulate in the right circles of Chicago's underworld without need for explanation. A single action, a single display of power, communicated more effectively than any warning ever could. Iris realized that night the depth of Dante's reach. Not just his influence over territory, finances, or rival factions, but over those he chose to protect. He had crossed the threshold from observer to guardian in the most visceral way possible. The line between life and injury, between choice and consequence, had been drawn clearly. And he had drawn it for her. She did not know then how much her life had already changed in that one confrontation. She only knew that the man who could command fear from thousands had shattered someone who threatened her, without hesitation, without remorse, and without question. Her place in his world, however small it had seemed before, had been declared with unshakable certainty. The echoes of that night would not fade quickly, for both of them. For Iris, it marked the first moment she felt the extent of his protection. For Dante, it was a crystallization of the choice he had begun making weeks ago, the choice to act for her, regardless of the cost or consequence. Dante turned from the crumpled form of Vincent Castellano to Iris. The rage in his eyes, the tension in his muscles, the lethal force he had just wielded, all of it melted into something softer, something impossible for anyone else to witness. The sudden shift startled her, leaving her rooted to the spot. "Let me see," he said quietly, his voice carrying authority yet tenderness, a contradiction she couldn't place. He stepped closer, careful now, as if his presence alone could hurt her if he weren't mindful. She extended her arm, wrist still aching, and he guided her toward his private office. Each step they took together was measured, deliberate, and somehow protective. When they reached the office, he gestured for her to sit. The chair, usually a symbol of his control, his command over the empire he ruled, now cradled her. Dante knelt in front of her, the first aid kit open beside him. He worked with precision, each movement meticulous, his large hands soft as they touched her bruised skin. She wanted to cry at the care in his touch, at the gentleness of a man who could be so brutal moments ago. "Why did you do it?" he asked finally, eyes locked on hers, studying every twitch, every hesitation. "Why risk yourself for her?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Iris said, her voice quiet but steady. His hands paused mid-motion, the bandage hovering over her wrist. His slate-gray eyes, still sharp, now held something different. Hunger, possessiveness, wonder, a depth she hadn't seen in anyone. "You could have been killed," he said, voice low, almost reverent, "and you think about right and wrong. Do you have any idea how rare you are?" "I'm nobody," she whispered, glancing away embarrassed. "Just a janitor. That's all." Dante's expression hardened, not with anger, but with a conviction that left no room for argument. "You're not nobody to me." His hands resumed their careful work, but the statement carried weight far beyond the immediate. He was claiming her presence, her courage, her essence, acknowledging that she mattered more than any status or facade. He watched her as if memorizing the way she moved, the small quirks, the care she gave to everything in her orbit. "I've been watching," he confessed, voice low but unyielding. "Watching you care for things others overlook. You straighten photos, water plants, notice what no one else does. You exist with attention and integrity, and it draws me." Iris swallowed hard, the reality of his words pressing down on her chest. The world outside their private office, outside the empire he commanded, seemed distant, irrelevant. This man, who ruled through fear and power, was now entirely focused on her safety, her choices, her presence. Dante's hands returned to her wrist, wrapping it with deliberate care. The gentleness contrasted violently with what she had seen him do moments ago. She felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety, knowing the man who could destroy a life with ease now held her delicate arm as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "You are mine now," he said, his tone unwavering, possessive but not cruel. "Iris Bennett. No one hurts you. No one touches you. You belong in my protection, and that is final." Her eyes widened at the declaration. There was no negotiation in his voice, no suggestion of option. It was a statement of fact, a line drawn between her and the dangers of the world. The full weight of it pressed upon her, an acknowledgement of her value she had never received before. She tried to protest softly. This is too much. I don't." "You're not understanding," Dante interrupted, calm but insistent. "You cannot dismiss this. You are rare. The world would not notice, would not care, but I do. I see you. Everything you are, everything you choose, it matters. To me." Iris's breath caught. She had lived life making herself invisible, avoiding attention, being the background in a world that didn't accommodate struggle or perseverance. Now she was center stage, the sole focus of a man whose presence had been synonymous with fear. The sensation was both terrifying and grounding. Dante straightened slightly, never releasing her wrist, but maintaining a firm, careful hold. His gaze did not waver. "You act with courage without seeking recognition. You help without expectation. You see the world, even its small corners, with clarity. That is why I cannot let anything touch you. Not now. Not ever." Her lips trembled as tears threatened to fall. Words failed her. The enormity of his attention, his claim, the impossibility of being cared for by someone like Dante Moretti, overwhelmed her. He leaned closer, whispering, his breath near her ear, carrying both intensity and assurance. "I am not here to change you. I am here to keep you safe. You exist authentically, and that authenticity has demanded my attention. You are mine, Iris, and that cannot be undone." For the first time, Iris allowed herself to believe it. The fear and uncertainty, the exhaustion of invisibility, all seemed to settle into something fragile but undeniable: trust. Not the kind of trust she had offered casually in the past, but the kind born from being recognized, claimed, and valued in totality by someone who could never be ignored. Dante stayed with her until the bandage was secure, until she understood that his presence was absolute and unwavering. He did not overextend, did not soften into charm. Instead, he claimed her in a way that aligned with every violent, protective, obsessive part of himself. The monster had vanished, leaving only the man capable of fury, devoted entirely to her care. The ride home was quiet, the hum of the black car filling the space between them. Dante drove with precision, his eyes on the road, but his attention constantly flicking to Iris. She looked out the window at Pilsen, at streets she had walked countless times, and suddenly the familiar surroundings felt different. There was a presence now, a shield of someone who would not allow harm to touch her. "You don't need to ask permission anymore," he said quietly, not looking at her. "Your safety is my responsibility. Drivers, security, measures you don't even know about. It's all for you. That doesn't make you indebted. It makes it simple. You are protected." Iris shifted, uneasy, and used to having someone assert such control over her life. "I don't want. I can handle myself," she murmured. He shook his head slowly, tone firm. "No. You don't understand. This isn't about weakness. This is about what you are to me. I am not a good man, and I will never pretend to be. I do terrible things. I have built fear into a city. I kill without hesitation. That doesn't change. But you are light. You are care, honesty, integrity. and I will not allow anything to harm that." Her hand brushed against her bandaged wrist, and she realized the enormity of his claim. It wasn't about ownership in the sense of control, not exactly. It was recognition, attention, a declaration that she mattered beyond the ordinary, beyond the invisible role she had lived in for so long. The following days were a subtle transformation. At work, she moved through the executive floors of Moretti Tower with the same quiet diligence, yet everything had changed. Dante's presence was felt without overt interference. Doors opened, minor obstacles removed, the small but significant markers of his care evident in her environment. The new coffee machine sat quietly on the counter with a note of encouragement. Contracts had been adjusted without discussion, reflecting recognition of her effort. She noticed cameras along her route home, discreet and protective, and she understood what they meant. When Dante appeared, it was not for display or intimidation. He lingered near stairwells, passed quietly as if assessing her environment, always observing but never imposing, except in matters of safety. Conversations extended beyond brief pleasantries. He asked about her days, her thoughts, her small dreams. She answered cautiously at first, unsure how much to share, and he accepted honesty without judgment. Word of his protectiveness spread quickly through the circles that knew him. The shock was tangible. The city's most feared man, the ruthless Moretti, fixated on a janitor. Whispers followed them in elevators, on Rush Street, through quiet hallways. The class difference became a topic of conversation. He, the untouchable power, and she, the invisible worker who could have been dismissed at any time. Yet, Dante's attention was never performative. He did not use this fascination to assert control in the traditional sense. His gestures were never crude, never overtly seductive. They were acts of care, adjusting a collar, ensuring she had a meal when she arrived late, providing warmth without words. When she left the office, he needed to see her depart safely. When she returned, he ensured her arrival was secure. Each action communicated a relentless awareness of her presence and well-being. Separation became a rare tension for him. Even brief absences left him scanning schedules, arranging contingencies, ensuring nothing could touch her. Iris began to notice the pattern, his quiet orbit around her life, the careful interventions, the subtle insistence on safety and recognition. At first, it unsettled her. She was used to invisibility, to managing her life alone. Now, someone formidable was holding pieces of her existence, creating a cocoon she hadn't asked for but could not dismiss. Gradually, her resistance softened. The world felt different with him in it. The daily grind of cleaning, commuting, and surviving shifted into a life where effort and care were acknowledged, where the unseen could be seen, where her light drew attention from the one person whose darkness could have destroyed her but instead chose to defend her. Through the quiet weeks, Dante's presence became routine yet extraordinary. She learned the cadence of his protection, the unseen surveillance, the occasional escort, the brief inquiries into her day, all balanced with his unyielding focus on business and power. He never demanded affection, never required gratitude, only offered protection as his form of recognition. In this new reality, Iris moved with awareness of being claimed, not in chains but in acknowledgement. A darkness she had respected and feared now existed solely to safeguard the light she carried. She began to accept it, understanding that in Dante's code, fierce protection was the ultimate form of devotion. For Dante, the world remained the same, his ruthlessness intact, his empire unchallenged, but within it, a constant recalibration occurred. One human mattered above all others. She was no longer invisible. She was watched, safeguarded, and valued in a way that changed the rules for both of them. The streets of Pilsen, the long rides home, the small acts of daily life, everything had shifted under the weight of his vigilance. Iris felt it in the air, in the small details that confirmed he was near, and she understood that this was no fleeting concern. Dante Moretti had staked a claim. It was unmovable, undeniable, and absolute. By the time the weeks had passed, the transformation was undeniable. Dante Moretti remained the same force of power and fear he had always been. Ruthless, commanding, impossible to confront directly. but in the presence of Iris Bennett, he had revealed a side of himself few would ever see. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't a shift in morality. It was recognition, devotion, a willingness to allow something pure to exist safely under his shadow. Iris's life demonstrated the first lesson: character is revealed in moments no one else sees. Her small acts, straightening a photograph, watering a plant, doing her work without complaint or observation, showed a soul of integrity and care. She had existed authentically in the spaces others overlooked, and that quiet honesty became the catalyst for the impossible. The second lesson followed from the first: even the hardest hearts crack when exposed to genuine goodness. Dante did not change who he was at the core. He did not become merciful or softened toward the world. What shifted was his response to someone who embodied honesty and courage in small, relentless ways. This revelation did not make him good. It made him present. It made him capable of protectiveness beyond calculation, beyond control. A third lesson emerged in his protection of her: love or devotion can manifest in ways that are intense, consuming, and necessary. Darkness can defend light. The measures he took to shield her, her safety, her comfort, her daily life, were never performative. They were absolute, fierce, and unwavering. He claimed her not as a conquest, but as someone worth extraordinary care. Protection need not be gentle to be true. Sometimes the fiercest devotion is the truest measure of value. The fourth lesson lay in masks. Both had worn them, Iris as invisibility, Dante as menace. Survival requires armor, and they had perfected it over decades. Yet the presence of the other revealed what had been hidden. Seeing beneath those masks, recognizing the humanity that remained, was transformative. Not through intervention, not through correction, but through simple observation and acknowledgement. Finally, transformation occurs when someone sees you as you are beneath the ruins. Iris did not fix Dante. She did not challenge his behavior or attempt to reform him. She existed with sincerity, and that authenticity created a mirror in which he recognized his capacity for care. That recognition became his devotion, and her existence became the reason for gentleness he had never shown before. The paradox was simple and profound. Dante did not become good, he became devoted. His violence and command of fear remained intact, but he now wielded those forces selectively, in service of someone he had chosen to protect. Iris did not change him. She illuminated the rare space within him where care and responsibility could flourish without contradiction. To be truly seen by someone who makes you their reason to exercise care is a rare gift. It reshapes existence. For Iris, it meant recognition and safety in a life that had been defined by labor and invisibility. For Dante, it meant an unbreakable focus, a new axis around which a part of his existence turned. They had discovered each other as equals in different ways, one as light, one as darkness, each revealing strengths the other could not have evoked alone. In Chicago's cold underworld, a janitor and a king found each other. They moved through the city with the subtle acknowledgement of this bond. In a world dominated by fear, violence, and indifference, two lives had intersected in a way that changed their trajectories entirely. A man who had never shown mercy now displayed it fully, absolutely, and obsessively to one person, the one he could not and would not allow to be harmed. It was not about romance in the usual sense, nor about redemption narratives. It was about devotion, recognition, and the capacity to see the value of a person hidden from most of the world. It was about the power of being witnessed, of being acknowledged, and of having your existence matter so fully that even the fiercest heart bends to protect it. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of unexpected transformation. Share in the comments where you're watching from and which lesson resonated most. Tomorrow's story promises intensity and insight you won't want to miss. Your support ensures these stories continue to reach those who seek them. Thank you for watching.